Hey everybody, today I'm talking about Tawantinsuyu, which is a 2020 release board game designed by David Turczi and published by Board and Dice Games. This one accommodates 1 to 4 players and takes about 90 minutes to play. If you are familiar with Board and Dice, every year they bring out a game or a couple of games with a rather elaborate name beginning with T, in this case Tawantinsuyu, but they've also come out with Tekenyu and Teotihuacan, Trismegistus, and so on. And honestly, this track record of games have been phenomenal for me personally. I've enjoyed every single one of them, and they are amongst my best of the best, making Board and Dice one of my favourite publishers at the moment. However, those games are generally designed by Daniele Tascini, whereas this one is exclusively by David Turczi. So a different designer, but in the same line of games. So this one is I suppose a worker placement game, and it's pretty involved, taking place on this rather large board with this kind of bird's eye view of this Incan pyramid. From kind of initial looks, I can completely understand how this game looks very saturated and very busy in terms of all the iconography on it. There's quite a lot going on in this game, but however, as you break it down, you can't do everything at once, and it's maybe not as bad as it quite seems. But taking that into respect, it is still a game that I would classify as in that medium heavyweight bracket. So heavier than your average Euro, but not too complex to the point where it's an absolute brain frazzler. The main mechanism in this game is worker placement, and you do that based on placing your workers, and workers come in lots of different colours. As you can see here, you've got white ones, green ones, yellow ones, blue ones, and red ones. And you're going to do that by placing them on these different symbols on the board. So you've got all these different symbols corresponding to cards that you'll have in your hand. So you've got these god cards here. The bottom bit being a bonus you can get by having statues or kind of starting resources. But what you're going to do is you are going to play one of these cards in order to play one of your workers onto a matching symbol. So for example, if I played this zigzag shape, I would discard it and put it next to the god cards in what we call the offering, so other players can actually draft these cards if they need to. So you've got a bit of a mitigation there in terms of getting exact cards you want rather than top decking when it comes to taking that action. And when you discard that symbol, you can place one of your workers, let's say a red one here, onto a corresponding spot. So let's say I put it on this spot here. Now when I place a worker down, I can take one of the 3 surrounding actions. So for example in here, I've got the take 3 potatoes action, I've got the build a building action, and I've got the build stairs action. But the way this works going forward is quite interesting, because if I was to play another red worker on a spot that I can connect through one action via one of these paths, so say I played this one here, then I can take 2 of those actions. So I'll be able to take maybe take 6 potatoes rather than just taking 1. And again, that compounds even further. So if I played a third one here, then I could take 3 of those actions and so on. So you can get quite powerful actions if you match up certain workers with each other. Now, and of course, that doesn't have to be your own workers you've placed as well. It can also be pieces that other players have placed. Now, all these workers have a unique power with them as well. So think 5 tribes where all the workers have a slightly different ability. So a couple of them are very simple. So the green ones, for example, the green ones, if you place your worker on a green space, even if it's a single one, you still get to take 2 actions. So it gives you a +1 action if you match a symbol. The same applies for the blue workers. The red workers, if you place them, you not only get to obviously take the action as normal, you actually get to take an existing adjacent pawn or token back into your kitty ready to be used going forward. And you also get to draw one of these warrior cards here, or a couple of them in fact. You get to draw 2, discard 1 and keep the other, and I'll explain what these are for later. So let's say I drew that one. The yellow ones, they make it cheaper for you to traverse the board, which I'll explain in a second, and they also give you additional action if you're the first one in that particular segment of the board. So for example, here, if I was the first one on this rung here, where no one else is, I can take an additional action. And the white ones as well, they give you the ability to draw more god cards, so more of these cards in order to get more mileage out of your turns, really. So that's going to be how the worker placement aspect is going to work. Now, there are fees in taking particular actions you want. So as you can see here at the temple, you've got your own little priest here. So I've got my priest here, which corresponds to this section of the board. So almost like in this little diamond shape here. Now, at any time I can choose to move him, but moving him is going to take an action. But additionally, I can choose to take actions further away from me, but I have to pay potatoes or corn in order to do so. So it's going to cost me an additional food resource to move in a region adjacent to me, and it's going to cost 2 food to go down a section, or 3 food to go down a further section. So if I wanted to go here, for example, I'd have to spend 1 food, 2 food, 3 food, and then eventually 6 food to get right to the bottom. So it gets quite expensive if you want to move further away from you, and even more expensive if you want to go on the other end of the board. So it can be quite expensive, meaning that sometime throughout the game you're going to have to move your worshipper, which is ultimately the second action you can take. So the second action is taking 2 mini actions, if you want to put it that way, where you can move your worshipper 1 or 2 spots around the little rondelle here and taking the corresponding action. So you've got these other actions here that you're going to initiate immediately, and I'll talk through those in a second. But additionally, you can either choose to draw god cards or draw warrior cards. You can choose to recruit workers from the village here. So if you're particularly strapped for resources, then you can take that additional action in order to stock up on certain things. Now, let's talk about some of the actions you can actually take from the board. So obviously you've got your resource gathering ones, you've got your gathering potatoes, gathering your stone, gathering your corn and so on. But you've also got some particular actions where you can do things such as drawing cards, looking at 2 and choosing 1. Or as building a building, because building buildings, it's going to cost you your resources. You've got 2 types of buildings here. You've got passive buildings, which have this kind of infinite symbol on, and you've got your, I suppose, production buildings here, which provide you resources. So these ones are going to basically trigger at certain points or give you permanent abilities. So for example here, and whenever it comes to a festival phase, I'm going to get 4 potatoes. And here, if you use stairs, you're going to get a point and so on. And there's lots of these buildings which can give you lots of interesting points. And these ones here, as I said, are going to give you basically a chunk of resources whenever you activate them. And the way you activate them is by taking a separate spot on the board, which are these ones here. So as you can see, that one lets you activate one of your production buildings. One of these spots on the board on the rondelle as well lets you activate all of your buildings, but you're going to have to flip them all face down in order to do that, meaning that you're not going to be able to use this action unless you take the separate action here to rejuvenate them all and flip them face up. So there are quite a few things you need to weigh up as you take these decisions. Let's talk about some of the other actions. Then you've got build stairs. So building stairs is always going to cost you a few stone to do so. I think it costs 3 stone. And then you can place one of your starting stair pieces, look like this, onto the board like so, and onto these stairs symbols, meaning that it's now going to be free for you, or -2 cost in order to go down that hill, which can obviously make traversing the board a lot cheaper than it would normally. And alternatively, if other players use your stairs, then the person who the stairs belong to are going to get a couple of points for doing so. There are additional actions as well in terms of building statues. And statues are quite a particular strong action you can take, because you can cash in gold and stone in order to build all these different statues which correspond to all the different god cards. And you've got large statues and you've got small statues. And the idea for these is that you are not only going to get victory points, so the bigger the statues you build, the more points you're going to get, but also you get to take an ability when you play a certain card. So let's say, for example, I had this god symbol here. That means as long as this god is in my possession, I can, whenever I play a matching god's card, I get the bottom action as well, which can be particularly powerful, especially if you have it earlier in the game. And the statues also relate to one of the actions on the board here, where you can cash in god statues in order to go up this track here. So you can spend a big statue to go up 3 spots, or a small statue to go up 1 spot. And this statue, this temple is important because whenever it comes to a festival, you are going to score the points depending on how high you are, and also get the resources depending on how high you are. And if you get right to the top, there's quite a few points you can get from that, as you can see. So that's a kind of a strategy you can go for just like that. Now, additionally, there is another almost set collection mechanism in the game through the tapestry action, or the weaving action, that looks like this. Now, when you take that action, you are going to draw 3 tiles, 3 of these weaving tiles from the stack here, like so, and lay them out in front of you. And then you are going to choose to buy either 1, 2, or 3 of them. You're paying either 1, 3, or 6 corn, respectively, in order to take them. And the reason you want to take these weavings is because not only at the end of the game, for each different pattern you have in a weaving, you're going to get set collection bonuses. But as you match the symbols up, so say for example I had this one here, and I matched it with my starting symbol, whenever I take the this action here, the merchant action, then I get to produce all my goods matching on my weaving. So I'd get 3 potatoes because I matched those symbols. And you can have as many of these weavings as you like, as long as you don't have duplicates in a particular thread of weavings. So that's going to be the weaving. There's quite a lot of points you can get that way. And additionally, they will trigger whenever a end of the round is going to take place. And the end of the round is going to take place when all of these villagers, all these different meeples are going to be taken from the village here. So that's going to be how the round is going to trigger, which is going to trigger one of these festivals, which is additionally going to offer points to the person who's triggered that festival. And that's going to be basically how the game's going to play out until 3 rounds are over, I believe. The additional actions on the rondel are pretty simple. For example, here you can choose to pay corn in order to move up the temple here. And the final action is, I suppose, a little bit different. This one here, where you are choosing to play these warrior cards to tribute goods, or to basically sacrifice these warrior cards in order to get resources. So, for example, here, if I triggered that action, I can play a potato to play any card face down from the warrior cards I've collected. And then for every warrior card I discard, or every person on the warrior card I discard, because there are cards with 1 or 2 people on them. Let's have a look here. Like so. And when I say I need to kill 1 man in order to get this building, or I need to kill 1 man and flip 1 over in order to take this resource, and so on, until you can eventually get some quite powerful abilities, either resources or pure points, or you can get climbing up the temple, or even things such as making weavings or taking statues. And these are an additional kind of way to gather points as well through area majorities or area control. As whenever you take one of these actions, you're going to put your disc onto that spot, and whoever's got the most spots here, whoever's covering the most spots, is going to get points equal to the amount of times this action's been taken. Because whenever you trigger that action, you're going to take the person from the village and you're going to put it in the graveyard here, which means that every one of these sections are going to score 1 point at this time for each of these sections, depending on the majorities. And that's going to be basically how the game works. It's not too bad once you get your head around it. You're just taking those worker placement spots, trying to get big combinations to get loads of actions, collecting your tapestries, getting statues to ultimately get the powerful abilities on the god cards and cash them in to climb the temple. Trying to get the majorities on these different areas on the corners of the board, trying to build stairs to navigate the board, and so on. So there's a lot going on, but you can't do everything at once, and you are somewhat limited to what you can do by the cards that you have in your hand. But at any time, you can also choose to draw cards and so on. So that's going to be how you play Tawantinsuyu. So in terms of meaningful decisions, there is a lot you can do in this game. Do you want to focus on those tapestries? Do you want to focus on climbing the temple? Are you going to go for these area majorities in the corner? Are you going to build a lot of stairs and try to get points that way and make it cheaper for you to get around? So there are a lot of thoughts and a lot of decisions to go into. Additionally, you can choose to get the buildings and get loads of powers, or constantly produce all your buildings and get loads of resources that way. Get the resources from your tapestry and then do the merchant action and get resources that way in order to build more and more and more. So there is a lot you can do on your turns. So in terms of meaningful decisions, there is a plethora of things to explore and to try, which is what you want from a game like this, and it wouldn't be one of these T-series games if you didn't have interesting decisions throughout. The balance of the game as well, I think, works well. Yes, you are subject to the meeples you have in your hand to get some certain bonuses and to get those combinations of getting the additional the additional actions by pairing them up together. But because you can use other players' meeples on the board in order to combine with yours, then you can get quite a lot of power that way. And you can always do something in this game, which is what I like. And I said all the different routes you can go down seem good options as well. And I think you're going to have to dabble in everything in order to get by in this game. The mechanisms I think are pretty simple overall. I mean, particularly the worker placement spot. Yes, it does look very convoluted and what you can do, but you are restricted to to paying resources in order to go anywhere other than where your worshipper is. So you need to bear that in mind, which could further limit you not only to the cards in your hand, but also to what you can actually afford. So you can't just do all these actions at once. It just isn't an option. So yeah, in terms of like mechanisms, it does actually keep you somewhat on track, and you can't completely do whatever you want at all the times, which is good. And the time investment as well, I think the game does eventually tick by quite quickly, and because the pacing of the game is dictated by the players in terms of taking these village meeples, then some turns are going to go probably pretty quickly, because at the end of the turn you can always choose to spend a potato or a cord to take one of these from this column. And yeah, ultimately dictated by the players. So some games could be particularly slow, and some games could be a lot faster than others. The uptime of the game as well. Yes, there is some scope for analysis paralysis, but as I mentioned before, you are limited somewhat to what you can do. And there is also a good amount of turn angst in this game, because there are inevitably going to be some spots on the board which become particularly inviting by the meeples that have been left there, meaning that you want to put a matching colour in between them, and sometimes you just don't have the resource in order to do so. So there are some really good amount of player interaction in terms of covering the spots on the board that you really want. You've obviously got the competition for the area majorities here. You've got the buildings that are scarce, and if you want a particular one, you're going to have to get in there quickly, and so on. So there are lots of there is some good passive player interaction in this game. The uptime as well is okay. I mean, there is, as I said, a little bit of scope for analysis paralysis, but ultimately you're not going to be sat there bored out your mind while somebody else takes their turn. And replayability is decent as well in terms of not only the different strategies you can go down, but you can focus on getting maybe different buildings and go for different approaches that way, and so on. So there are lots of little things that can kind of change the feel of the game, from the tapestries you gain, from the statues you gain, and the powers you're getting from those statues, and so on. So there is a good amount of replayability here. Aesthetically is something I'm in two minds about. I think it's extremely busy in terms of all the symbology and stuff, but that is a fundamental part of the game. It needs to be in here in order to have that card play mechanism. And once you play this for a little while, it's not as much of an eyesore as it might be initially. I don't think it's as attractive as a lot of the other T-series games. I think those games have a slightly more distinguished and refined look to them, whereas this one looks a bit more basic. But it still fits the bill. It doesn't look bad at all. I just don't think it looks quite as nice as the other titles, such as Tekenyu or Teotihuacan, where I think they just look absolutely stunning. Where this one still looks okay. It's pretty plain and pretty standard, I think. But the component-wise, I think the components are really good. You've got a nice, huge board here. All the tiles and that are good quality. All the player pieces and the different resources are nice. And the cards are of a decent quality as well. So yeah, no real complaints. The only thing is that the look could have been a little bit more pleasing to the eye, I think. Theme, yeah, this is a dry Euro. It's just another one of those ancient South American themes. But I find that genre works well because the symbology is always interesting, and you've got some nice colours and some nice details and stuff you can put onto the board using that theme. So no complaints there. Progression is something that I like in this game because more and more meeples are placed onto the board, meaning that more combinations are made. You're climbing further and further down the stairs or down the temple to get these powerful actions. And you can build your engine up in terms of your tapestries and in terms of the buildings you can produce with. So it has a nice snowballing effect in terms of how quickly you can get your resources. And additionally, whenever you climb up this temple, you're getting more and more points depending on when that festival is triggered. So yeah, there is lots of ways to get points, and it has a nice progression of the game. Scalability as well. Works absolutely fine at all player counts. I mean, even at 2 players, the board is slightly tightened up in terms of some of these spots having workers put on them anyway. But yeah, that works absolutely fine. And again, there's no loss in gameplay or experience if there is fewer players playing. And comparisons, while this does have a lot of these standard Euro tropes, you've got your worker placement, you've got your resource management, buying your buildings and things, I think the uniqueness of this board system works really well in terms of, as I said, compounding your workers in order to get loads of actions. That works really well. I think everything fits together quite well. The tapestries are something I personally don't mind, but I think some players might find that luck of the draw a bit limiting. Whereas there are ways to mitigate that in terms of buildings and things. But, it's still going to be a bit of a factor because somebody might keep drawing the tiles that they want in order to get loads of end game bonuses or in terms of points, whereas you just don't get lucky and miss out on that. But yeah, I don't really have an issue with that at all. So yeah, overall, I think this game is really well put together. It flowed much better than I thought it would. I said I was a bit intimidated by the look of the game and the pure amount of symbology and things, but it actually was pretty easy to digest once you got your head around it and started playing. I will say that the player aids that come with this game are fantastic. Everything you need to know is on the sheet. It might look a bit busy from the standpoint of this video, but I assure you that it's not too bad. And you can't do all of these actions at once. You are limited to what you can do in terms of resources and the god cards and where your worshipper is. So yeah, it's not as bad as it may initially seem, but ultimately it's a lot of fun. There's lots of decisions to be made. It's engaging. There are tough decisions, lots of paths to victory. You can't really ignore everything because if people really run away with the temple, you're going to fall behind. You're going to fall behind if you don't concentrate on these spots here, which can give you loads of powerful rewards, and so on. So it's one of those things where you have to focus on everything. And additionally, the statues, they're really powerful to have, and the time does quickly get away from you. And if you don't make use of these rondelle spots, then you can miss out big time. Because again, if you don't get to this spot and end up cashing in all your statues by the end of the game, then you just sat on them for no reason, whereas you could be flying up this track. So yeah, I like the time pressures in this game as well. So yeah, overall, another rock solid game from the T-Series. Another great design by David Turczi, who's generally known for his solo modes in games. And it's just really good to see him doing his own thing and making his own game. Not like he's not done that before, but it's good to see another rock solid one. Board and Dice continue to make amazing games that just feel tailored for me. And this is certainly another one of those. I think in terms, if I had to put it in rankings with the other games, I would probably put this one at the bottom right now, but that's certainly not a dig on this game. It's still a solid 8 out of 10 for me. But I think time will tell in terms of this one on where it sits, but I really do love the other ones, and this one is not far off on how good those ones are. So yeah, that concludes my thoughts on Tawantinsuyu. Certainly gets my seal of quality, another rock solid game. And I hope you've enjoyed the review. If you have, please hit like and subscribe to my channel and check out my other videos too. For everyone else, I'll see you next time on Chairman of the Board. Bye.